Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Bowermaster with Bowermaster Insurance. We appreciate your time this morning. Welcome to another resource webinar by Bowermaster and Associates. Today we'll be discussing establishing effective safety committee. And following this webinar, you'll receive an email with some tools and resources to support what we're discussing here today. So at this point, I'll hand it off to our safety and work comp claims partner, ESM, and Anthony Poston. So Anthony Poston, it's all yours.
Thanks, Adam. Much appreciated. We're excited to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is establishing a safety committee. And so we're going to jump right into it here. So today's discussion, first we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on within the workers' compensation industry. We're going to show you some trends, and that's going to lead into why establishing both a safety committee and a safety program is so important. And then we'll talk specifically about what the topic of the day is, which is the safety committee, and who should attend, how often are you holding the meetings, what are the goals, how do you establish the goals, and then what tools can you use to manage and track all the safety initiatives that roll up into that plan. So as Adam mentioned, there's Adam's great picture and mine as well. It's a little bit about us, but enough about us. We'll just move right on past that. So let's talk about what's happening within the workers' compensation industry. Now, this slide, it shows the total written premium of workers' compensation in California, and you can see the ebb and flow. And if we were to look back over 100 years, we would see this ebb and flow just like we're seeing here. What's most important, as you can see in 2004, we were at a peak, so $23.5 billion in written premium in California. And then Senate Bill 899 was rolled out by the Schwarzenegger administration, and the goal is to reduce the cost of insurance and the cost of losses, and it worked. But as with most reforms that we've seen in California, there's reform of the reform going on, and now we're starting to see this upward trajectory. So again, in 2015, we're at $17.5 billion written premium, and if we were to extrapolate that out, we would see continued increase of the cost of insurance. So that's really important to note. This next slide talks about the cost of losses. The total cost of losses in California was $12.5 billion. So injury costs ratchet up to $12.5 billion per year. And you can see the data is as of 2015. This is all Workers' Compensation Insurance Rating Bureau data. And they typically take about 6 months to 9 months in order to get all that information in, make sense of it, do the analysis, and then come out with the total cost. So we anticipate 2016 to be another uptick. And this is drilling down a little bit lower. And this is a slide that I really want to make a point of, because we're going to use some of this information in upcoming slides. But you can see the average cost of one indemnity claim in California is $80,000. Excuse me, $80,735. So $80,000 for one claim. Now that could be extremely significant, especially for smaller employers and even for larger employers, so when you have multiple. And with the new XMOD formula, which we covered in prior webinars, with that new change, it's supposed to offset some of this cost. But what you need to notice and need to make note of is that when insurance underwriters are pricing your insurance, while they're taking that XMOD formula into consideration, they're still looking at the total cost of loss, and they're still trying to make a determination as to whether or not this is a good risk to write. So having multiple indemnity claims at this price point is still going to increase your insurance costs overall. Now that leads into a couple of specific questions. So do you have safety and workers' compensation objectives for 2017? And are you expecting increases in your workers' compensation insurance costs? Based on those last slides, we're seeing the trend go up. So I would assume yes, even though some of you might be lucky enough to have had your XMOD go down because of the new formula change, overall we're seeing an increase in the cost of insurance. Now, how are you going to offset that increase in expense? And I gave this presentation to a group of wineries in Napa, and we used some of their information as examples on how to really extrapolate what does this mean to me? What is the cost of a claim, and how does that relate to my production and to my widgets that I'm making, in this case, bottles of wine. So with a $20 bottle of wine times 12 bottles is $240 per case of wine. Divide that by 80,000, which is the cost of one indemnity claim, And that's 333 cases that they need to sell in order to offset that expense. And at $15 a bottle, you're looking at 444 cases. Now, some of these wineries are only generating 3,000 to 5,000 cases a year, so that is a significant cost. Also consider the fact that at $80,000 for one indemnity claim, that's going to haunt you for 3 years because that $80,000 impacts your XMOD for 3 years. So in actuality, it's about $240,000, which you'd then just multiply by 3 for each one of these examples. So you'd have to sell almost 1,000 cases to offset that one cost, that one indemnity claim. So consider what types of products or services that you offer, and then plug in those numbers and determine if we have an injury at 80,000 or 50,000. How many hours do we have to work? How many widgets do we have to sell in order to offset that cost? Now, what Bowermaster does a really good job of is they project indirect costs. So the indirect loss cost, which is your financial leakage, as they would say, that indirect cost, we typically use about a 2-to-1 ratio. In construction, it can be as high as 4-to-1. So for every $80,000 claim, you have the indirect cost of managing that claim, hiring somebody to come in and take the place of that person, temporary disability, XMOD points, insurance premium, and so forth. And so at a 2-to-1 ratio, you're looking at $160,000 in direct and indirect costs. Taking that same example at the top, you'd have to sell 666 cases or 888 cases at those 2 price points. So it's a significant cost to the organization, both direct and indirect. And it also rolls back up into what are our goals to mitigate these exposures so that we don't become another statistic or a trend on that chart that we saw. So now let's talk a little bit about the safety committee. And we establish safety committees for organizations. We've done this numerous times. And so some of the questions that we always ask are, for those of you that do have safety committee meetings, how often do you meet? What's your agenda? What are your goals for the year? What metrics do you measure and how do you measure them? And do you delegate responsibilities amongst the team? And what reporting mechanisms do you use for accountability? Because you want to track these initiatives to make sure that you're actually reaching your goals. And if not, you need to pivot and relook at what is our strategy, why is it not working, what can we do to tweak the model in order to get the results that we're looking for. So I like this chart a lot because it kind of talks about the development hierarchy of a safety committee. So you have a safety committee at the top. They're establishing the roles and responsibilities of the organization. Then you have the safety manager who's implementing those specific initiatives that map up with those goals. They're going to govern the safety activities. They're ensuring compliance both with CAL-OSHA and with the established policies that we've set for the organization. They're also providing the department manager training. So that department manager is now getting specific training on the policies that the organization has set. That department manager then trains the line employees or the technicians, and they're complying with the standard operating procedures that have been established, compliance components that roll up into the overall goals of the organization. Now, while this is a top-down approach, we always try to create a participatory culture. And that participatory culture is a suggestion program that comes from the bottom up. So we provide the employees with a voice and a tool to communicate all the way up to their department manager, to the safety committee, to make suggestions on improving the program. And so now that participation really resonates with the organization. And you start to see a change in the culture of safety, and safety becomes intertwined into production instead of having a separate pillar of safety and a separate pillar of production. So the more effective you are with implementing these safety programs, governing them, but then also giving a voice to everyone within the organization to make improvements, the more that safety program really resonates with the organization. So now we kind of talked about what the safety committee does and what the safety program will do based on the implementation. Here's a quick slide that you can use to just identify who's on the safety committee, who's the safety manager. Typically that's either a senior manager or the CEO or the HR director. And then we always push to have a safety coordinator because there's a lot of documentation that has to happen based on the safety program requirements of CAL-OSHA. And so a safety coordinator helps get all that information. And then I'm going to show you an Excel matrix and a dashboard that we use to populate so that the safety committee, we can review what the dashboard analytics are and then make decisions based on what the results are. Now you've also got your safety committee at the lower level, so you've identified who those people are. And then down below, you can see you've got Bauer Master, you've got your advisor, you've got your account manager, you've got the insurance carrier and the adjuster and the loss control representative. And if you have a good safety program, I definitely recommend that you bring the loss control rep out there and have them see what you're doing, because the more they're integrated into your safety program, the more they're going to go back and report to the insurance underwriter how great of a job that you're doing and how proactive that you are. And between that and then also the story that Bauer Master is telling based on their participation in your program, the underwriter is getting a really good understanding as to the effectiveness of the safety program. And so they might give you safety credits, they might give you additional benefits on your premium, knowing that this organization is working towards mitigating exposures. So you're a good risk at that point. And then on the left side, you've got the Bauer Master Service Partners, which includes us, and that's part of the bigger picture of their workforce management program. So loss control, safety, workers' comp claims management, return to work, and HR consulting. So this slide really shows that you have a lot of resources at your disposal other than just your internal safety committee. So I really encourage you to utilize them. Again, contact Bauer Master, make sure that you set up a time to meet with them, talk about what your strategic goals are, what are the resources that you need in order to achieve those goals, and then we can all help you craft a plan that's going to get results. Okay, so next slide. Now we're looking at, we've identified the safety committee members. Now what are their roles? What are their responsibilities? What are the goals of each one of their departments? And that safety committee is usually made up of department managers because they're decision makers, and they can report back to the committee as to what's happening within their department. And this slide in particular, this is actually from a bakery that we work with, and this is the safety committee roles and responsibilities of each one of the members. And you can see from senior management to HR to maintenance to the plant, production supervisor, we've got fleet maintenance, and then we've got the safety coordinator. And we've identified what their specific roles are on the safety committee. So every time we meet, they're reporting back on what their goals and what their responsibilities are and what the results are of their department. So don't feel like you have to write all of this down. I just want to reiterate, you're going to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation today. You're going to get a copy of a lot of the material that we're going to talk about. So I know some of you are probably writing frantically, but don't worry, you're going to get all of this in an email shortly after the webinar. Okay, so we've identified the roles of the safety committee. We've identified the participants in the safety committee. We've identified what their roles and responsibilities are, and now we want to hold them accountable. And so what we've designed is this committee member monthly briefing report. And this manager monthly briefing report, you can see on the right side, we identify specific key risk indicators that roll up into what the safety goals are for the organization. And that includes, have we had any injuries? Did we conduct any inspections? What training was completed? Were there any worker instructions that we've developed, standard operating procedures or job safety analysis? Were there any violations of the policies that we've set? And were there any recommendations on improvement? And so each month we're having the manager fill this report out and submit it to the safety committee, and then they read it at the safety committee. And so we go around the circle and say, okay, what are the results of your department this month? And they're able to provide all this information. So while they're working behind the scenes over the course of the month to implement these initiatives and manage it, this report should take 10 to 15 minutes for them to complete. And then they're providing that to the safety committee, which is an accountability factor for being on the safety committee. You're going to get a copy of this as well, so don't feel like you have to write out what's on there. Okay, so now we're looking at establishing the schedule. And I think one of the most important things for your safety committee is to pick a set date and ensure that you hold the meetings. And if you're too flexible on, we'll maybe meet this month, but maybe not next month, or we don't really meet frequently or consistently, that doesn't work. With safety, you have to be consistent, and that becomes part of your culture and part of your overall strategic plan. So this slide, you can see we've set the schedule for the first quarter. We typically set the schedule for the entire year, and we pick a specific date. We're going to meet on the third Thursday of every month from 3 to 5. We know who the safety committee members are going to be. They're going to attend. They're going to provide their monthly briefing report. We're going to have a set agenda. And we're going to go through all those items because they roll up to our strategic plan for the year. And that leads me into the agenda. So I've been on a lot of safety committee, initial safety committee meetings, and a lot of times there just isn't a set agenda. And it's more of what's the topic of the month. I sat on one safety committee and they talked about fire extinguisher training for 3 months and there was never any resolution. So the goal of a safety committee is to have a specific agenda, because it's it's expensive to have all of those people in that room, and we don't take that for granted. So you've got all of your decision makers on the safety committee for an hour or 2 hours, and they're working on the plan. And so that's a lot of payroll sitting there. So you want to make sure that you're getting maximum benefit and that they're there for a reason. And so by setting a set agenda, then you can go through each one of those items, make sure you're covering everything, which again rolls up to your overall plan. And then once you adjourn the meeting, everybody's back to implementation and management. And so typically with our agendas, we're looking at prior safety committee minutes. Did we approve those? Were there any issues, any impediments to us completing some of those action items? Were there any accidents? Were there any violations of the safety program in this last month? Everybody goes through their monthly briefing report, and then from a new business standpoint, what's the status of the safety program? We go through our safety matrix, which I'm going to show you in just a second. We discuss next month's safety initiatives, which could be inspections, trainings, audits, what have you. And then there's an open forum for just suggestions and improvements. So by having this set agenda, you can stay on point to make sure that you're covering all the topics that correlate with what your overall safety program is. Okay, so now goals. I keep talking about goals. Well, here's some goals that are very simple that you can establish. So what's your frequency goal, your injury frequency goals for the year? And you could look at your last 5 years of loss runs and do some trending and say, okay, well, we've averaged 5 claims per year, and that breaks down to 2 indemnity, 2 medical only, and 1 first aid. And so our goals this year are to reduce that by 25% or 15% or 10% or whatever's realistic. Now, once you set those goals, then what are the specific initiatives that you're going to roll out in order to achieve those goals? And then from a severity standpoint, what's been our average severity over the last 5 years? And this one's a little more difficult to manage because you could have one outlier that drives up your overall severity. But if you remove that, then what does the trends look like from a severity and a cost standpoint? And if you look at, well, we had 2 lost time claims that were $80,000, and those employees were off work for 200 days each. If we implement a return to work program and we reduce those lost days by 50%, that's going to save us roughly 200 lost days, which equals about 20,000 in temporary disability, which calculates so many points on your mod and your insurance costs. So there's ways of looking at the severity and how much lost time you had, and then come up with some of those goals. And that goes down into return to work, reducing the lost days. And the way you calculate that is by going to your OSHA 300 log and looking over the past 3 years how many lost days you had. So if you average 100 lost days per year, you can take about a $100 per day temporary disability rate. So 100 times 100 is $10,000. And you paid $10,000 in TD, which goes temporary disability, which goes right into calculating your XMOD and your insurance premium. And so set some goals of reducing your lost days by implementing a more robust return to work program. And then also training. And I find a lot of employers are trying to figure out what training to provide. I think the simplest way is to take your top 3 loss leaders. What is driving your cost? What injuries are driving your frequency and severity? And just focus on providing training on those 3 loss leaders. Provide 1 training per quarter. And in theory, you're going to raise the awareness, you're going to reduce and mitigate the exposure, and that in theory should drive down your frequency and severity and help you achieve your goals. So a lot of information on that slide. Again, you're going to get a copy of this, kind of work through it with your safety committee and figure out, okay, what are our goals and how are we going to achieve them? Now, these last few slides are the safety matrix, and what I did is you're going to get a copy of this Excel spreadsheet that we put together to help you manage your safety committee initiatives. But rather than switching between Excel and PowerPoint in this webinar, depending on your bandwidth, it might crash. So what I did is just made snapshots or screenshots of some of the specific tabs within that Excel spreadsheet. And I'm going to show you those just so that when you do receive it, you have some training and some insight as to how to utilize it. But really a safety matrix, which is an Excel spreadsheet, is capturing all of the initiatives and information that you need to govern the program from a safety committee level. So these next few slides, for example, schedule of activities. So we put together a schedule of activities for the year for the safety committee. And you can see safety committee meetings, we've set the dates. Safety trainings per month, we've established a schedule. We have manager monthly briefing reports. We conduct safety inspections. Were there any safety violations? Do we have to review any safety policies that we've established? Are we tracking our injuries to see if we're on point with the goals that we've set? So this is the first tab in the Excel matrix, and you can see we've designed who's the owner, what are their responsibilities, what material do they need, and when do they need to implement the plan. This next one is CAL-OSHA policy management. So I'm sure a lot of you, and those of you that don't have this, CAL-OSHA does require you to have specific policies on how you're going to govern these primary exposures, from bloodborne pathogens to fall protection to fleet safety to heat illness and so forth. And so you need to look at your safety program and do you have policies that adhere to CAL-OSHA's standard, as well as best practices for managing those exposures in your organization. For example, heat illness, that's going to be coming up here pretty quick. May, June is about the time OSHA starts to really pursue heat illness exposures, especially for those in the valley. So do you have a heat illness prevention plan? What does that look like? Have you provided training to the employees? How are you going to provide shade and water if you're working out in the fields or on a construction site? So some things to think about. Just think seasonality-wise. OSHA is always seasonal with what their goals are, and heat illness is one that's going to come up on the radar pretty soon. So injury tracking. So we've set some goals for the year, and here's a way to track them. So frequency goals for the year are 5, for example, and you can see in the first month we had 1 first aid, 1 medical only, 1 indemnity, and the severity goals for the year are $833 per month, which breaks out to $10,000 per year, and that was the total cost of breakdown by specific topic or by specific element: first aid, medical only, indemnity. And then we've established these charts here for you to track. So at the safety committee level, you're looking at this information, you're looking at the safety policies, and you're talking to the safety committee about where are we at, what's the status. Now we've set a training schedule for the year as well. So you can see we've got the employee name, department, date of hire, the supervisor, and then we've set the schedule of trainings for the year. In this case, it's fall protection, personal protective equipment, an annual safety orientation, warehouse forklift safety, and at the bottom we're calculating the percent complete by month. And so you can see number of employees 18, number of trainings completed was 18, so they had 100% compliance of training all their employees in month 1. In month 2, we only had 83%. Month 3, we had 61%. So this allows you to set some goals from a training standpoint. We want to have at least 90% compliance with all of our safety trainings per month. I mean, the ultimate goal should be 100%, but the reality is a lot of times 90% is sufficient. You just need to look for empty cells over the course of months, because I'm looking at employees that aren't getting the training any month. And you can see like employee 14 didn't get training in February and didn't get training in March. And I want to know why. Because is it the supervisor's responsibility? Did they not provide the training? Is the employee not participating in the program? So these create some questions for you to ask and to sort out, why are these employees not getting the training? What are the impediments that are preventing that? And then the monthly safety matrix for the manager monthly briefing report. So again, we talked about that monthly briefing report for the safety committee members to submit each month. And this is just a way to track it to make sure that, yes, 100% every month, everybody's submitting their forms. If not, we want to know why. Why are they not able to fill out their report and submit that to the committee? And this one is a really important one from a safety violation standpoint. Most organizations, and this is the hard part about being a manager or supervisor, is just discipline. But within a safety program, if you set standard operating procedures and you're managing to those and employees aren't complying with those procedures and you're providing verbal warnings or even written warnings, it's best to track those. And what I'm looking for when I'm on the safety committee is repeat offenders. Because a lot of times it's the repeat offenders that end up getting a claim, it gets litigated, it becomes a bigger issue rather than making a decision on whether that employee should be an employee or not. And so when you're tracking these violations at the safety committee level, we're having those discussions about each one of the violations. And then is there additional training that we need to provide to the employees? Why are these violations occurring, first and foremost, and what can we do to improve that? Okay, so that is just a quick snapshot of how to govern a safety committee. There's a lot of information that we provided to you, but we just wanted to give you an overview. as to what a safety committee looks like. We're going to provide you with a lot of these tools, so expect those to come shortly after this webinar. Here's some additional website resources for you. The Department of Industrial Relations, they have got information about everything from workers' comp forms to everything CAL-OSHA. It's a great website. If you have any questions with regards to what do you have to comply with, you can type that into their search bar and it'll tell you specific standards that you need to comply with. Obviously, we're here as a resource for you. So if you have any questions, be sure to reach out to your Bowermaster advisor so they can quarterback getting those resources to you. The safetyblr.com, it's a great resource for just a bunch of tailgate talks. So if you're looking at creating your training schedule for the year, these are the things we want to train on. Here's a place that you can go to get specific tailgate trainings so that you don't have to create them from scratch. Also contact us because we've got plenty as well. Adam, I'll turn it back over to you for a summary.
Thank you, Anthony. Much appreciated. Just in closing here, safety committee is important, and Bowermaster can give you all the resources and tools working with our partners, ESM, to support your safety committee process and your safety measures as an organization across all industries. But a lot of companies need support and or help with the execution and implementation, which are oftentimes where companies fall short. And when you fall short, that's when injuries occur and your costs go up. So just know that Bowermaster is here for you and can help you with the execution and the implementation and get you rolling in the right direction if you need it. And we appreciate your business and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.